This is the original podcast edition of The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton, now part of the complete Pirates of Wefrevane series. The books are available as audiobooks, ebooks, and paperbacks. This podcast originally aired from 2010 to 2014. Stick around after the story for commentary from me, the author, more than a decade later. Chemistry, a Panamindorah story. Related to the Guild of the Cowry Catchers series. Written, narrated, and produced by Abigail Hilton. In Wefrevane, the apothecaries call it Temple White, but the books from the Lawless Lands call it Lily. Either way, it's deadly to felids. Lou watched from the tree line as Silvio picked his way across the meadow towards one of the large, silky white flowers. "Does it matter which one?" he called. "Nope, and it doesn't even matter which part of the plant, but I figured you'd enjoy the flowers." "Now, why would you figure that?" He was a skinny 16-year-old foxling, wearing more coal than would have been appropriate for a sailor, and Silvio was no sailor. He was dressed in plain rough-spun today, but it looked new, an improvement on the last time she'd seen him. His ear-piercings sported a collection of tiny pearls in various colors, and when he bent to examine the plant, Lou glimpsed the flash of an intricately wrought jeweled medallion on a chain around his neck. Silvio had just returned from a trip to the Lawless Lands, and he'd done well by the look of it. He selected a flower, broke off the long stem close to the base, and came padding back, stepping lightly around patches of wet ground. They'd both left their boots with the zebras. Silvio's paws were dark with mud, and his tail, normally as white as the lilies, was speckled black and brown. His long, silvery white hair, braided today down his back, had several twigs in it. He should have looked bedraggled, but, in the misty meadow among the flowers, he looked more like some androgynous earth spirit out of a minstrel's ballad. The illusion broke as Silvio squelched into a deep patch of wet ground near the tree line, and Lou took a quick step back. "Ocelons are even more sensitive to temple white than Grishnards. Get rid of the stamen, please. I don't want the pollen anywhere near me." Silvio stood still, examining the flower critically. He broke off the long stamen, velvet with orange pollen, and stuck it in his mouth. His pale blue eyes flicked up to Lou's green ones. He grinned around the piece of flower and suckled it suggestively. Lou burst out laughing. "Now I've seen you do everything." She felt oddly touched, though. "You do trust me, don't you?" Silvio sucked the stamen into his mouth, chewed, and swallowed. "Course I do. You said it wasn't poisonous to canids." "It's not," said Lou, "although I can't imagine that it tastes good. I've eaten worse." Silvio tramped the rest of the distance to where she stood under the trees. He licked pollen from his lips, then gave an exaggerated pucker. Lou ducked away, laughing. "Not a chance. Not even if you didn't have deadly pollen in your mouth. We were nothing but trouble to each other that way, Sylvie. If I'm going to have some rare reaction, I'd rather have it with you than on the job," said Silvio more seriously. "Good point. It's a slow poison, though. You said that's what you wanted." "Yes. He has a house full of armed guards. He needs to feel fit as a Grishnard on catmint until I'm long gone." Lou handed Silvio a piece of cloth soaked in water from her canteen. Silvio wrapped the flower, making sure that any pollen-stained petals were moist and unlikely to send clouds of orange dust into the air. He put the whole thing into a small, dry sack, and they started off through the forest. No trail led up to this meadow, but Lou knew the way. "Anything else you can tell me?" she asked. "How do you want to administer it?" "In wine, probably," said Silvio. "He's very suspicious. I don't trust myself to be able to poison only his food. I need something that we can both drink, but it'll kill him and not me." "Well, this should do the trick," said Lou. "Like I said, it's deadly to felids, but canids could make a meal of it and not get sick. He'll start to feel unwell a few days after you leave, probably vomiting. He'll urinate a lot, and then not at all. A few days later he'll get confused and sleepy, and then he'll go to bed and never get up. Silvio nodded. Sounds about right. Lou didn't press for further details. She never wanted to know too much about how Silvio used the substances she provided him, and he didn't usually volunteer information. "It's his business partner," said Silvio after a moment. Lou made no comment, but he continued. "Funny thing is, my target thinks we're meeting to discuss the assassination of said partner. He doesn't know that his partner has already paid me a lot more than he's offering to make his final business deal." Lou laughed in spite of herself. "They sound like terrible people." "Everyone's terrible people," said Silvio. "You're not. You just don't know it." Silvio flicked out a knife and proceeded to pick a squirrel off a branch up ahead. The animal fell, thrashing, into the weeds, and he scrambled after it to retrieve his knife. "Bring back the meat if you're going to do that," called Lou. "It's just a rat with a fluffy tail," retorted Silvio as he searched through the underbrush. "Good eating on those rats." "I hate squirrels," muttered Silvio as he returned to her with the small body. "You hate the word, not the animal," thought Lou. But she took it anyway and put it in her pack. She tried to change the subject. "You're getting better with the knives. Malpin must be a good teacher." "He is." Silvio laughed. "A deadly flower called temple white. He'd like that." "Is he still trying to get you to leave the temple service?" "I'm not in service. You know what I mean." "Yes, he doesn't like it. He says Shelts who work for the priestess come to bad ends, like Shelts who do what he does don't come to bad ends. I haven't met many old assassins." "He wants something better for you." Silvio snorted. "I wonder if he's forgotten what I was doing when we met. Being an assassin is something better." Lou had to agree with him there, although she almost pointed out that Silvio mixed his old and new profession so freely that he could hardly be said to have left one behind. "Let's not quarrel today, though." "While we're out here, I need to gather a few more things," she said aloud. "Anything else I can fillet?" "Oh, I'm sure we can find something." By evening, they were back at Lou's apartment. 2 rooms at the top of a tenement building not far from the docks. It wasn't much, but it was hers. For the last year, she'd managed to pay the rent with actual money, not favors. Like Silvio, Lou felt that she'd come a long way. "Someday," muttered Silvio, "I'm going to buy you one of those little shops under the street, where real shady apothecaries do business." Lou giggled. "Dreamer. You got me off CERN, and that's already more than I can repay." Lou was an 18-year-old Ocilon immigrant. She'd arrived 3 years ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge in her head. Most of that knowledge had been gathered from 2 former employers, a drunken apothecary and an elderly healer working in the slums of the shantytown where she'd grown up. Lou knew how to make medicines that she could sell, but she could not afford market prices for the materials. She was forced to either gather them in the woods, a day's journey from town, or buy them at reduced prices from smugglers who had not paid legal tariffs. Drying plants hung everywhere in the apartment. Lou's metal and glass equipment sat in the corner behind a screen. She had intentionally chosen the top level of the building because the rooms had a small window, and ventilation was vital to many of her endeavors. She'd even snuck onto the roof a few times, although she risked eviction if she was caught. Lou knew that the climb to her rooms eliminated some potential customers, but she also suspected that it eliminated visits from local law enforcement, who couldn't be bothered. Most days she visited the market, where she sold soothing teas, salves for arthritis, medications for coughs and fevers and aches. Later, Schultz would visit her in her rooms at the top of the tenement building to buy other things, most of them more embarrassing than illegal. But Silvio was her oldest friend, and she owed him. He'd made himself unofficial apprentice to a skilled assassin. Lou might not like what Malpin did, but he was the only reliable adult in Silvio's life. She helped them whenever she could. Word had slowly gotten around that Lou was a meticulous chemist, with discretion, cheap prices, and a knowledge of dangerous substances. Other Shelts began to turn up at her door. They were polite, always paid on time, and never talked about their work. "Can you have it by tomorrow morning?" asked Silvio. "Yes, if I can put it in an alcoholic tincture." "That'll work." Silvio thought for a moment. "Can you bring it down to the ship? I have other errands to run." Lou made a face. She'd been on a ship only once before, during their passage from CERN. The journey had been racked by storms, and she'd spent it alternately vomiting and hiding from harassing sailors. From what Silvio said, the trip had been a lot better than his first voyage away from CERN, as a stowaway in the hold of a merchant ship. Still, Lou had stepped onto the dock in Seashine, vowing never to touch ship planking again. "Only for you, lovely." "Where is it?" "Slip 23 on the eastern side." "Anything I should know about the crew?" "They won't be a problem. The captain will be around. I'll tell him you're coming, and he'll show you where to leave the package." "All right." She wanted to give him a hug, but, in spite of all his flirting, Lou had learned long ago not to touch Silvio without plenty of warning. She reached for his hand. "I'm glad you're home. Tell Malpin I said hello. Do you think you could get him to play cards with us some evening?" Silvio gave a flash of teeth and squeezed her fingers. "Not likely, but I'll ask." Lou spent the rest of the afternoon pounding and mixing and drying materials over a low fire. She had 3 other packages to deliver tomorrow, so the journey to Silvio's ship would not be wasted. She wondered, idly, what arrangement he had with the ship's captain and crew. He seemed to have spent half of the last year with this ship, and was in no hurry to leave. The ship itself appeared quite accommodating to his needs. But then, Silvio lived amid a complex network of trades and favors. Maybe he killed the captain's business partner. Lou rose early the next morning, determined to get her trip to the docks over at once. "If I hurry, I should be able to catch Silvio before he leaves. Then I won't have to speak to the captain or the crew." Her memories of the grasping hands and leering stares of the crew on the journey from CERN made her shiver. Lou moved through the streets of Seashine in the pre-dawn light, admiring the cheerful, red-painted doors and whitewashed buildings of the business district. Somewhere below these streets, she knew that other business was taking place. The underground. It was the natural byproduct of an old city, where fire, flood, or earthquakes occasionally devastated even the most well-planned buildings. New buildings were erected, and the old buildings and lower levels were walled off and forgotten, until they were unearthed by less reputable business Shelts. Some of the tunnels in the underground were practically as well known and respectable as the street on which she now stood. But whenever an area became too accessible to law enforcement, Seashine's darker element could always find new layers, hidden beneath false walls and secret doors. Any territory worth having was quickly claimed by one of Seashine's street lords. However, compared to CERN's underground, Haplag's was both tame and stable. Lou knew of shops that had been in business for years down there, quietly paying their rent and selling their wares. Could I ever have something like that? It seemed impossibly complex and grown up. Lou reached the docks and searched for Silvio's new favorite ship. She spotted it half a row away. It wasn't painted to Silvio's taste, but it was impressive. Black sails, black hull, a figurehead of some toothy beast polished to a glossy sheen. The hull conspicuously lacked a name, but it might as well have said pirate. Lou stopped before she reached the ship and straightened her clothes. She'd taken care to look as uninteresting as possible. Plain, rough-spun pants, old boots to hide her cream and nutmeg-spotted paws, long striped tail tucked into her pants, a headscarf to hide her thick, dark hair and part of her face with its striking ocelot markings. Her bright green eyes, heavily lined with natural stripes, were impossible to hide, and had an arresting effect on those who hadn't met many ocelons. However, if Lou walked quickly with her head down, she looked much like any courier in the city, and might even be mistaken for a Grishnard boy from behind. Get in, leave the package, get out. Dawn mist was still rolling between the ships as Lou trotted up the gangplank. It took her a moment to realize that the Shelt who hailed her from the deck was not a Grishnard. As he came closer, she was surprised to see mottled tan and black skin. His hair was speckled brown and black and gray, and he had a short, brushy tail, completely unlike the long, tufted tail of a Grishnard. Hunty. And that would explain the figurehead, a hyena. You could have warned me, Sylvie. Still, she decided that this was a good development. Dealing with Hunty could be awkward, but they were generally respectful towards females, and incurious about exotic species like ocelons. I'm here to see Silvio, she told the sailor on watch. If he's not here, I'll speak to the captain. The sailor looked unsurprised. Captain's in his cabin. May not be awake, though. So Sylvie's not here. Lou resigned herself to dealing with a stranger. It's important, but it won't take long. I need to see one of them. The Hunty shrugged. He whistled, and a young Hunty ship's boy came scampering out of the misty rigging, reminding Lou of the squirrel that Silvio had killed the day before. The adult said something to the child in their native language, which sounded like nothing but growls and clicks to Lou. The boy disappeared towards the stern of the ship, and the sailor on watch motioned to Lou to stand by the railing and wait. She sighed, stepped onto the deck, and made herself comfortable, with her elbows on the railing, facing the ship. She didn't want anyone sneaking up behind her. To their credit, this did not seem likely. The handful of crew that she could see were all Hunty, and they paid no attention to her. Somewhere overhead, someone working in the rigging whistled a pleasant tune. Lou could smell cooking food. 2 more children seemed to be playing a game in the rigging, and Lou remembered that Hunty ships were usually crewed by families. She smiled. She'd begun to feel almost relaxed when a Shelt emerged from a hatch near the stern and came sauntering towards her. Lou blinked. A moment ago, she would have bet her life savings that the captain would be another Hunty, but this person could be nothing of the kind. Even at a distance, his golden curls stood out against the darker colors of the ship, and his skin was a uniform cinnamon. She caught the elegant curve of his tufted tail, twitching as he made his way among the piles of rope. A Grishnard? Captaining a Hunty ship? She'd never heard of such a thing. He came up to her, stretching and yawning in a very uncaptain-like way. He rubbed his eyes. Can I help you? I brought a package for Silvio. The captain was wearing a loose, frilly white shirt, tucked into black pants, and unbuttoned to the navel. Lou's height put her at eye level with his bare chest. Face, she ordered herself. Look at his face. What is the matter with you? His honey-gold eyes matched his curls, and his hoop earrings flashed in the morning light. Lowland Grishnard, she thought. And again, captaining a Hunty ship. How did that happen? He was peering down at her face with an odd expression. Oh, you're the apothecary. Sylvie didn't tell me you were, Lou raised one eyebrow at him. A what? He straightened up suddenly. Lou thought she saw the beginnings of a blush creeping up his neck, but he turned around before she could get a good look. I apologize. I should have had someone waiting for you. I forgot. Just leave your package with the sailor on watch. I do believe you're babbling, Captain. Have I so unnerved you? Lou came trotting after him. She put a note of polite determination into her voice. I'm afraid not, sir. I can't hand it over to anyone else, but I will put it wherever Silvio directed. We've done this before. We have an arrangement. He should have told you where. The captain stopped, long tufted tail twitching. Yes, he did. I just didn't realize... Lou was beginning to feel annoyed. You didn't realize that I was an ocelon, but I can assure you that I'm just as much a professional as... The captain turned with an expression of alarm. No, I didn't realize... He lowered his voice so that it wouldn't carry to the rest of the deck. I didn't realize that you were a lady. My cabin is unsightly. I apologize. Lou blinked. Then she smiled. She thought, well, I'm hardly a lady. But she found that she did not wish to break his charming delusion. Instead, she said, My name is Lou. I am a healer and an apothecary. I work all over the city, and I assure you that no manner of domicile will startle me. He made a little bow. Basil, ship's captain. Welcome to the Nightingale. Lou returned the bow. A beautiful name for a beautiful ship. I'm surprised you don't have it painted in gold on the hull.
It would match your eyes."
Basil smiled. She could tell that the praise of his ship pleased him. He made an airy gesture as he turned away. "Oh, I'm sure I'll get around to it someday."
"Pirate or smuggler?"
thought Lou, but without malice.
"If you were the truly vicious type, you wouldn't be in Seashine."
As he turned away, she took the opportunity to whip off her headscarf and stuff it in a pocket.
"Why did I wear such hideous clothes?"
She combed her fingers frantically through her hair, hoping that none of the hunty on deck were paying attention. As they descended into a hatch to the lower decks, Lou struggled to work her tail out of her pants. She tucked her shirt in, and, by the time Basil turned in front of his cabin door, she felt marginally presentable. It must have worked, because he stopped, blinking at her in the soft light pouring in through a portal window. Lou grinned at him. She wished she'd worn flashier earrings. At the same time, a voice in the back of her head whispered,
"What are you doing? He's got to be at least 10 years your senior." "It wouldn't stop Sylvie," she told herself. Correction, she thought a moment later. It hasn't stopped Sylvie. Oh, when will I learn not to get excited about anyone I meet through Silvio?
It was obvious why Basil had been embarrassed about inviting her into his cabin, and why he hadn't attempted to straighten it quickly. The room was strewn with Silvio's things. Lou caught sight of a cloth of silver coat trimmed in purple feathers that she remembered. There were also a lot of clothes that she'd never seen before, but which bore the unmistakable mark of Silvio's taste. Boots trimmed in fur of questionable origin, silk shirts in green and red and teal, undershirts with lacy collars and cuffs, and a panoply of hats, all of a size much too small for Basil. Lou also spotted a little sea chest that had been in Malpin's flat last she knew.
Sylvie must trust you,
she thought wistfully. Most of the clothes were piled on the floor, but one conspicuous trail led to the bed, probably in the order in which they had been removed. Basil glanced at this as though seeing it for the first time, and made a desperate attempt to shove the clothes under the bed, a truly grand canopied affair in red velvet. He turned to look at Lou, color rising again in his handsome face. There was a moment of awkward silence. Lou stood in the midst of the chaos and pursed her lips. "Maybe," she said at last, "you could give him a closet?" Basil barked a relieved laugh, and Lou laughed with him. She couldn't even feel disappointed. He had a delightful laugh. "I have," he managed, through near tears. "He filled up mine, and now he's expanding onto every available surface." Lou nodded. "For such a little thing, he takes up a lot of room."
"In every conceivable way."
Basil nodded enthusiastically. Lou took a few hesitant steps around the room. It had a magnificent stern window. She took another covert glance at the bed and burst out laughing. There were mirrors around the inner canopy. "I bet he loves that."
Sex was always a performance art to Sylvie, but God's help you if you want anything more than a performance.
Basil laughed a little more easily this time. Lou guessed that he'd never had this kind of conversation with a girl before.
"Well, there's a first time for everything. Isn't there lovely?" "Stop it," she ordered herself. "His tastes are clear, let him be."
But, as she crossed the room to examine the window, she could feel his eyes on her.
"I do believe you're admiring my bum, sir."
She bent over to examine the chest, just to give him a better look. He actually said to leave it there. Basil had come up behind her, and he crouched to open the chest. He did this by putting his arms on either side of her. He smelled like brine and soap, and just faintly of Silvio.
"Well, I'll play if you will."
Lou fished in her pocket for the lily tincture. At the same time, she shifted back so that her hair brushed his face. Her long tail flicked against his inner thigh, and the side of one breast brushed his arm. "Did he tell you where to put it?" she murmured in his ear.
"Because Sylvie would know where to put it."
Upon reflection, Lou decided that she might have overdone things. Basil almost lost his balance. He had to catch himself with his hands to avoid sitting down on her tail. He struggled up. "I do apologize," he babbled. "So clumsy of me. He said to put it under the books." Lou was sure that he was blushing again, but she didn't want to embarrass him by looking up. She shifted the small pile of books at the bottom of the chest. Unlike the rest of the room, the chest was meticulously organized. Underneath the books, she found a wooden box.
Inside was a red feather. Good enough. Lou placed a vial in the wooden box next to the feather, closed everything, and stood up. She suppressed a sigh. Now to awkwardly extricate myself from this situation. Basil was standing by the window with his hands in his pockets. I'm sorry to turn up in your cabin with so little warning, she said. I've known Sylvie for a long time. Sometimes these things happen. Basil turned back to her with a smile. Oh, I know. Or, I'm learning. Like you said, he takes up a lot of space. I know that look, thought Lou. But don't get too attached to him. He'll just break your heart. To her surprise, Basil crossed the room and took her hand with an almost courtly bow. If you come again, this place will be cleaner. I promise. To Lou's horror, she heard herself start to purr. To purr intentionally was one thing. To purr accidentally, in an unintended display of emotion, was quite another. She stopped herself at once and hoped fervently that Basil hadn't noticed. If he did, he was kind enough to pretend otherwise. Would you like breakfast? He asked. Or just tea if you've already eaten? He thought for a moment, and added hurriedly, In the officer's cabin, of course. Lou smiled. I need to make several more deliveries, she admitted. But thank you for the invitation. Her thoughts churned as she left the ship and went through the motions of dropping off the remaining parcels. He's obviously in love with Silvio. You have no business interfering. But Sylvie's relationships never last long, and they're never exclusive. Sylvie is probably seducing a target right now. Does Basil know that? None of your business, Lou. At least this explains Sylvie's attachment to this particular ship. He can probably get Basil to take him anywhere he needs to go to fulfill a contract. They're sleeping together, and Sylvie sees this as paying the rent. Does Basil realize that? Again, none of your business, Lou. But Sylvie doesn't usually leave his most cherished possessions with casual partners. What does that mean? Is he in love with Basil? He hasn't talked about him. And since when did Sylvie get so many clothes? He must have done well with those last few contracts. Was Basil flirting with me? Or was he just being polite? Clueless? He doesn't seem the clueless type. Maybe it's not boys he likes. Maybe it's just non-Grishnards? Small species? A happy thought. Lou hummed to herself as she opened the door to her flat. When he talked about me coming to his cabin again, does he expect me to drop off more potions for Silvio? Come for a social visit? Something else? Lou stared, unseeing, at her meager dinner. I don't know why I'm even thinking about this. Basil is obviously in love with his ship, as well as Silvio. I hate ships. What use has a pirate for an apothecary? They don't poison people, they stab them. Lou made a face. She did not like to think of herself as a poisoner. I sell more healing potions than poisons. Something was niggling at the back of her mind, some distant part of her brain that kept trying to get her attention. I should go to bed. Go to bed, and maybe it will all make sense in the morning. She gave herself over to happy reflections on Basil's golden eyes and blonde curls as she got ready for sleep. Scents of brine and soap and skin. Curly blonde chest hair that led down and down. Lou dreamed of Basil. Shirtless, the lean, supple muscles of his arms and chest dappled with morning sunlight. They were having tea in the officer's cabin. Silvio was there too, wearing a frilly white shirt with lacy sleeves and collar, and a pale blue waistcoat that matched his eyes. His silver-white hair fell in a gleaming cascade over his shoulders, and his fluffy white tail chimed with tiny bells. I told him everything you like, he said to Lou. For dinner, I mean. Lou giggled. She stopped giggling when she spotted something among the teacups. A familiar vial sat nestled between the cream and sugar. Lou put her hand over her mouth. That's... Basil picked it up and tipped a few drops into Silvio's cup. Lou squeaked in horror. Silvio sipped at the tea. Don't worry, it won't hurt me. I trust you. Across the table, Basil winked at her. Lou sprang to her feet, knocking cups and plates in every direction. No, she screamed. No, no, no! Silvio's cup hit the floor and shattered. He made a choking sound. His eyes shot to her face, desperate and confused. He tried to stand, toppled over, and began to convulse on the floor, his slender legs kicking like a rabbit in a snare. Lou shrieked through her tears. She was still shrieking when her eyes snapped open in the dark. Oh, gods! The distant alarm bell had grown to a roaring clang. Oh, gods, I gave him the wrong vial! Lou struggled up from her pallet on the floor, flung open the window, and stuck her head out. Red moon was still low on the horizon, and yellow moon hadn't risen at all. She caught distant sounds of activity from the streets. Still early. I haven't been asleep for more than half a watch. When was Silvio going to meet his target? Lou felt as though she couldn't breathe, but she forced herself to stillness. Think. He wanted the poison by today. He couldn't have been going any earlier than tonight, and probably not until tomorrow. Lou threw on her clothes at frantic speed. She paused to snatch up the satchel she kept by the door in case of medical emergencies. Although it's not likely to do a lot of good if he's already tasted what was in that vial. She locked the door and took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly bowling over one of her neighbors. In the street, she started running, through the tenement houses, past a little branch of the business district, and on towards the docks. Please, please, please. Lou bounded up the gangplank of the Nightingale and came to a panting halt as a surprised-looking sailor blocked her way. She gasped. I need to talk to Silvio or Basil. Wait here, said the sailor with agonizing languor. Lou couldn't stand still. She paced the deck. Basil appeared more quickly this time. He was wearing a red waistcoat and cream-colored pants that were tight in all the right places. He had a drink in one hand and looked like he might have been in the middle of dinner. "Lou!" he called, with no apparent irritation at her sudden appearance. "Did you change your mind about—" Lou darted up to him. "Sir, I am so sorry to interrupt your meal, but I have to speak to Silvio. It's very important. Is he here?" "Please say he is. Then we can all have a laugh about this." Basil's brow furrowed. "Unfortunately, you just missed him. He left about a quarter watch ago." Lou screwed her eyes shut. "No, no, no." She forced herself to look at him again. "I know you just met me, and this is asking a lot, but could I see that sea chest again? I need to know whether he took the vial I gave him. Please." Basil looked at her for a moment, his face dappled in light and shadow from the flickering torches on deck. He had just a trace of coal, and it made his bright eyes look even brighter. He inclined his head and motioned for her to follow. Lou scampered after him. He seemed to sense her urgency, because he took the stairs as swiftly as any sailor in the midst of a boarding, graceful and cat-quick. They were down the hall and into his cabin a moment later. Lou went straight to the little chest and opened it, found the wooden box, and... She rocked back on her heels. Tears stung at her eyes. The vial was gone. "What have I done?" She felt Basil's hand on her shoulder. "Can I help?" "No, not really. I've just killed my best friend because I was too busy flirting with his boyfriend to pay attention to what I was doing." Lou gulped in air and raised her head. "Do you know where he went?" "No." "Of course you don't. And he didn't tell me either. I'm sure he didn't tell anyone, except maybe Malpin, and there's no time to find him." Lou forced herself to stand up. "He's not dead yet. Probably. Think, Lou." What was he wearing? Basil didn't hesitate. Dark blue waistcoat, gray linen shirt, silver earrings, lapis studs. He thought for a moment. Not much coal. Lou shut her eyes, considering. Subdued by Silvio's standards, dressier than what he'd wear for dirty work, but classier than what he'd wear to a tavern or gambling den. They're probably meeting in the target's home, and it's a nice home within walking distance. Probably one of those big mansions on the west side of the bay, but that could be so many places. Lou opened her eyes again. Did he do or say anything else that might give you an idea of where he went? It's really important. Basil swirled wine in his glass. He put on an odd scent. Basil set his drink on a dresser and rummaged in a lower drawer. He held up a dark brown glass bottle. I thought it was unusual for him. I think he even put it on his boots, or maybe in them. Lou snatched the bottle. She thought she recognized it. She pulled the cork off and gave it a deep sniff. Scents of burdock and cardamom flooded her sinuses. She sneezed, and her eyes watered. Basil looked concerned. It's not a strong scent, to a Grischnard, I mean, but it's not pleasant either. I commented upon it, and Sylvie just laughed and said it wasn't meant to be pleasant. Lou threw her arms around his chest, leaned up on tiptoe, and kissed his cheek. "Thank you,"
she said breathlessly. She left him standing there with a stunned expression as she raced from the room and pounded up the stairs to the deck.
He only left a quarter watch ago. Maybe this will work, if I'm not too late.
Lou paused on the gangplank, shut her eyes, and drew in a slow, deep breath. And there it was. Lou had made the potion for Silvio last year. A client had required him to come to a location blindfolded, and he'd wanted a way to retrace his steps. The scent Lou had given him was faint to Grischnard's, undetectable in a crowded room, but it was powerful to the sensitive noses of foxlings and ocelons. For the right Schelt, it was the equivalent of olfactory breadcrumbs.
Why was he wearing it this evening?
Silvio was a better tracker than Lou, because his profession required it. If he thought he needed breadcrumbs, he must be going somewhere either confusing or unfamiliar. Lou knew Silvio's signature scent, but she could not have followed it through a busy street. However, Lou had trained herself to parse fine differences in chemical substances, and this substance had a distinctive signature. Now that she knew what she was looking for, she was able to follow the scent, away from the Nightingale, through the harbor, and into the busy streets of Seashine. Silvio had taken a circuitous route. Lou cursed him quietly for his caution. She was on the edge of the business district, and the streets were well lit, with a reasonable amount of activity. She still had no idea of where she was going when the trail led down into a stairwell, and Lou caught sight of an iron-grated door.
Oh.
Suddenly things clicked into place.
The underground. Of course. His target is probably a smuggler. That's why he and his business partner didn't handle their differences in a more legal way.
The door stood open this evening, and a bored-looking Leopon lounged against the wall nearby. He said nothing as Lou entered, but she could feel his eyes on her back. She bristled against her clothes and knew that her tail must be fluffed up to twice its normal size.
Priestess blood, Lou. Could you look any greener if you tried?
Lou had ventured into the underground during daylight to buy contraband supplies, but she much preferred dealing with distributors in the market. Of course, that made the materials a little more expensive. The closer one came to the source, the cheaper things got. However, a teenage Ocelon, particularly a lone girl, caused patrons of the underground to draw the wrong conclusions and to give her the wrong kind of attention.
How does Sylvie do it? He's even smaller than me, and younger, but somehow he manages to seem 3 times as large. Maybe I really should wear flashier clothes.
The part of the tunnel in front of her looked like an extension of the streets above. Lights fell through grates in the ceiling at intervals, and Lou could see shoppers and merrymakers coming and going on the sidewalk over her head. Many of the heavy metal doors on the walls to either side of the passage stood open, emitting cheerful pools of lamplight. In some cases, a sample of the vendors' wares had been set out near the doorways to tempt shoppers. Lou saw Grischnards and Leopons and Ocelons, and even the occasional fawn, inspecting baskets of herbs and dried mushrooms and cheese and fish, leather goods and jewelry, clothing and toys. It didn't look like the kind of place one was likely to be robbed or raped. With the exception of the unobtrusive guard by the door, it looked like any other commercial street in the city.
Nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be afraid of,
Lou repeated to herself, as she followed the scent of burdock and cardamom down the passage. It was harder to trace here with so many sharp, competing smells, but it was also fresher.
Sylvie wasn't afraid of getting lost in this area, surely. Where are we going?
As she'd feared, the trail soon veered away down a side passage, then into a pipe in the wall. The pipe was roomy enough, but completely dark. It branched several times, and now Lou was glad of the scent trail to guide her. She emerged into a wet, dripping space amid a forest of brass pipes, which, from the smell of it, still handled some of the city's sewage. It didn't even feel like she was walking in a proper passage any longer. She didn't hear or smell any other Schelts, for which she was grateful. However, a moment later, Lou pushed aside a leather curtain and looked out and down onto a large room full of activity. It appeared to be an underground bazaar, with lines of tent booths lit with smoky tallow candles. Silvio's trail had brought Lou out near the ceiling, and she spotted a steep path leading down over jagged piles of masonry.
Obviously this is not the only way in.
She wondered whether Silvio had gotten this far on his own, or whether he'd been led by someone else. She cursed her own inability to make sense of the mingled smells on the cold, dirty stone underfoot. Silvio's trail brought her right in among the tents. Lou caught the scents of drugs that could get a sailor banned from port. She saw skins of zebras, gazelle, and pegasus, side by side with griffin and ocelot and leopard. She even thought she saw a foxtail, so large that it could not possibly have come from the four-legged animal.
Oh, Sylvie, what are we doing here?
One shop appeared to specialize in blood-stained valuables, booty that pirates could not easily sell to more reputable shops. Another pavilion was selling slaves of questionable origin, possibly including a few unlucky Grishnards. Another sold beasts, terrified-looking zebra foals, wretched molting pegasus, ocelots in wire cages, and even a couple of griffin cubs too old to be legally purchased. Yet another stall offered slave and beast alterations, branding, declawing, tongue removal, castration. Prostitutes wearing nothing but collars and bangles wove their way among the shoppers, and the thump of a drum drifted over everything. Lou was getting a headache. The tallow candles had a rank odor that reminded her of death. She wanted to run. But then she saw again, in her mind's eye, the expression of hurt and betrayal on Silvio's face in her dream.
No, that can't happen.
As quickly as possible, Lou followed the trail across the room to a pavilion against one wall. A Grishnard in neat cream and rust-colored livery was standing in front. He had a sword at his side and looked like he knew how to use it. Lou took a deep breath as she approached.
Calm. I'm a consultant. I'm a professional. I am not a terrified kid. Professional.
She went right up to the armed guard and said, "Hello. My colleague, a white foxling, was to meet with your master this evening. I have information that they requested." Lou tried not to hold her breath. She knew she was gambling, but she was running out of time. The guard's expression did not change. His eyes ran over her. No one mentioned a colleague.
Ah, so he was here.
"I'm early," agreed Lou, "but I think they will want to hear my news. It is critical." She could see him weighing her words against any possibility of trouble.
Here's where it pays to look small and harmless, thought Lou.
The guard motioned with his hand, and she stepped into the tent. It was just a foyer, really, hiding a door in the wall. The guard searched her. He took her bag. "You'll get this back if the master says so." Lou's heart sank. Some of the things in her medical kit had taken months to acquire or create.
But I'd trade it off for Sylvie alive.
The guard unlocked the door, and Lou stepped into the hallway beyond. A boy of perhaps 12 was standing on the opposite side of the door, also in fine livery. He had a Leon slave brand, small and neat, over his left eye. Lou tried not to grimace. Even in Wefravane, facial slave tattoos were considered distasteful.
The boy must have come from the lawless lands. Is this the home of the slave dealer?
Any pity Lou had felt for Silvio's target evaporated. She realized, also, that she'd been going roughly west the entire time she'd been underground.
We're probably underneath one of the mansions on the Upper West Side.
The scent of burdock lingered unmistakably in the hall. She wondered whether the Leon child had noticed it. "This person needs to speak to the master's guest," the guard told the boy. "Please escort her to the library." Hope rose in Lou like the fragile scent off a flower.
They wouldn't behave this way if anything horrible had happened, would they? Or is "take her to the library" code for "take her to the basement, cut out her tongue, and put her in the slave pit"? No turning back now.
Heart hammering, Lou followed the child down the hall, through several turns, and up a flight of steps. They passed through a heavy iron door, currently unlocked. They stepped into a dimly lit stairwell, reeking of more tallow candles, and went up 3 more flights of steps. The boy opened another door, this one locked, and so low that they had to stoop. Lou looked around, blinking. Now they were clearly in the basement of someone's home. The tallow candles had been replaced by a single oil lamp upon a table. The flagstones underfoot were rough, but clean, and the door looked less like something out of a castle dungeon and more like a forgotten closet. The basement was full of supplies, including strong herbs and spices. For the first time, Lou was not certain that she could detect the potion she'd given Silvio.
What if he's not even here? What if we're going to the wrong place?
But there was nothing to do except follow the boy around sacks of flour and dried beans to a steep set of steps in the wall. They came up at last into a pleasant, tiled corridor.
Red moon looked in through spacious screened windows with curtains blowing softly in the breeze. As Lou had suspected, the house sat on the cliffs just west of town. The ocean glittered serenely in the distance, an absurd contrast to the bazaar going on below. Lou sucked in a deep breath of air that smelled of brine and lavender and jasmine, and, just faintly, of burdock. The boy trotted on ahead of her. Light spilled from a doorway further on. They walked through a tastefully appointed sitting room, awash in lush carpets, and stopped at last before a polished wooden door. The boy knocked. Lou realized then that he hadn't spoken. Not once. She wondered whether he had a tongue. Someone opened the door. A Grishnard bodyguard, Lou guessed. He was big and dark-haired, with olive skin. Mountain Grishnard. He filled the doorway. "The master is not to be disturbed." The Leon boy glanced at Lou, and now she was certain that he could not speak. "I need to see your master's guest," she said, as levelly as possible. "I'm a colleague, and I have information that will affect the night's negotiations." The bodyguard looked at her suspiciously. A moment. He shut the door. Several agonizing heartbeats later, he opened it again and stepped aside. Lou entered the room. Her eyes skipped over the scene. Silvio, alive. Another Celt opposite him, slender, bright-eyed Grishnard, graying at the temples, impeccably dressed in subdued tones. They were sitting around a table strewn with papers. There was a wine decanter, drinking glasses, and the remains of a small meal. Distantly, she took in the rest of the room, curving wooden bookcases, gleaming in the lamplight, the odor of sweet leaf smoke and incense, comfortably stuffed chairs, carpets on the floor. Silvio looked up from the table, saw her, and went still. His face betrayed nothing. She forced herself to look at the Grishnard across from him. Bright, cunning eyes met hers, a note of distant amusement. "Can we help you?" Lou was suddenly conscious of her plain clothes, scuffed and dirty from her crawl through the underground. She wondered how Silvio managed to stay so clean. Lou made a deep bow. "Sir, I am a consultant. Your guest asked my opinion of your venture." She wondered how much she could say in front of the bodyguard. The Grishnard laughed easily. My. Consultant, really? And what does she consult about, Fluffy? Fluffy. It was what Silvio told clients to call him when he couldn't be bothered to produce a better pseudonym. Lou smiled and tried not to bare her teeth. Silvio came to life. "She's a street performer and pickpocket," he said, with a flip of his tail. "You'd be surprised at the things they hear. But I'm afraid there's been a mix-up. Alia thought I wanted her to slip a poisoned handkerchief into his pocket, but it turns out that's not necessary." "Poisoned handkerchief?" drawled the Grishnard. "I would have thought a performer could find more certain ways of doing the deed." Lou's eyes flicked at the bodyguard, and his master waved his hand. "My valet is entirely trustworthy. You may be frank." Valet. Right. She had caught sight of a sword as tall as Silvio dangling from the valet's hip. Silvio was watching her closely. Lou stared at him, willing the information to pass between them. Silvio's would-be employer sipped at his wine. "Do you think I could use a poisoned handkerchief? Sounds easier." "No, sir," said Silvio smoothly. "The handling of such things can cause impotence. Ocelons are, of course, less delicate." The Grishnard paused with his glass halfway to his lips. "Well," he said, peering at Lou with renewed interest. "How fascinating." Lou resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Sylvie, if we get out of this alive, I may have to smack you." "I'm glad you're here, though, Alia," continued Silvio. "My esteemed client feels that this task is best accomplished by himself. I am merely a consultant, here to show him how it's done. Perhaps you'd like to offer your opinion as well." Lou almost giggled. "How did you bring him around to that idea? The nerve." Silvio reached inside his waistcoat and produced a quart vial, similar to the one that Lou had given him. However, this vial contained a violently green liquid. "This, my lord," said Silvio, "is deadly. Handle with care." He placed the vial on the table where the Grishnard regarded it as one might regard a rabid rat. Lou had to agree that it looked deadly, She wondered what kind of food coloring Silvio had used. The green was nearly fluorescent. "We'll practice with regular wine," continued Silvio. As he spoke, he produced another vial from his waistcoat. At a glance, it looked empty, but Lou knew better. It was full of clear liquid. He proceeded to fill the vial with wine from the decanter, tipping out the contents into the wine so neatly that even Lou, who'd been expecting it, hardly caught the movement. The target, on the other hand, had gingerly retrieved the vial of livid green fluid and was examining it in fascination. Lou suspected that the bodyguard was equally distracted. Silvio poured 2 tumblers of wine. Lou thought, for one horrified moment, that he was about to take a sip, but then the target asked, "How quickly will he die? He can't keel over right there at the table, but he's got to be dead before the next yellow moon."
"Picky, aren't we?"
"Of course, sir," said Silvio. "He won't get sick for about a day, and then it will look like gut grape. You will be wholly unsuspected." "You won't get your pay until he's dead," warned the Grischnard, "and only if he dies within the parameters that I've described." "I understand, my lord," said Silvio. "To that end, let us practice." He raised his glass in a toast. Lou stepped forward and took it from him. She could feel the blood beating in her ears, but she opened her mouth, and words came out. To her surprise, they sounded calm. "Allow me to demonstrate a time-honored technique of street performers." The Grischnard looked at her with undisguised disdain, but also a hint of lust. Lou felt certain that he cared not a whit for her poisoning techniques, but he would happily look at her all day long. "Go on." "After dinner, as you're drinking and having a censer of sweet leaf, you poison your own drink." The Grischnard's eyebrows rose. "Tricky." Lou winked at him. "Indeed, it's much easier than poisoning anyone else's. Of course, you don't drink it after that." "And then I switch it with his," said the Grischnard slowly. "Well, that is one way, my lord, though I must say it lacks creativity. Another option is to walk around the room, gesturing, like so." Lou paced about the library, making sweeping gestures with her drink. Silvio was watching her with an expressionless stare that meant he was trying to figure out what was going on. "You say something amusing, perhaps involving the likely paternity of his children," continued Lou. The Grischnard gave an amused snort. "Then," said Lou, "as he opens his mouth to laugh, make a sweeping gesture, and—" She pirouetted and tossed her drink directly into the face of the surprised bodyguard. He stood there, blinking, wine running down his face. His master burst into startled laughter, then set down the green vial to clap as though he were at a play. "I had no idea that training as an assassin could be so amusing," he chortled. "I may have to do this more often. Alia, right? Are you available to hire for other types of occasions?" Across from him, Silvio's pale face had gone a shade paler. Lou was certain that he'd gotten the gist of what was going on. One hand inched inside his waistcoat. In the same instant, there was a gasp behind her. Lou turned to see the bodyguard stagger against the doorframe. He put out a hand to steady himself, eyes screwed shut, shaking his head. Then he dropped to his knees, gagging, a thin line of frothy drool dangling from his mouth. Lou whipped back around to see the Grischnard client in the act of springing to his feet. She saw that he, too, was armed, and now he was drawing his sword. Silvio's hand flashed out of his inner pocket, and the knife left his fingers before the Grischnard had gotten his sword entirely free of its scabbard. The knife buried itself with a sickening thunk in the center of the Grischnard's throat. Behind her, the bodyguard made a desperate attempt to draw his own weapon, but the muscle spasms were already beginning, and Lou doubted that he could grip anything. The master of the house stumbled back, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish, soundless. Silvio darted forward, delivering a vicious kick that knocked his victim to the floor. He jerked his knife free from behind, releasing a spray of blood, which Silvio entirely avoided. He pulled the Grischnard's head back by the hair and finished cutting his throat, muttering as he did so, "You should have offered more money, and you should have been less of an ass." The guard was in full-body convulsions now, and Lou felt sorry for him. His face contorted, the muscles of his neck stood out like cords, and his legs hammered madly against the door. Silvio crossed the room, cursing, to put him out of his misery. He threw the bolt on the door just as a voice from the far side boomed, "What's going on in there?" Lou was in tears now, whether from seeing her own handiwork, relief that Silvio was still alive, or fear that they would yet be killed, she could not say. Silvio rounded on her. "What was that?"
Rat poison, she said miserably. I gave you the wrong vial, Sylvia. I'm so sorry. He stared at her, pale eyes wide. Lou wondered, belatedly, whether he might kill her. Sylvia was not the most forgiving creature. There was a furious hammering from the far side of the door. Sylvia shut his eyes and took a deep breath, fists clenched, jaw working. All right, job's done. Not as neatly as I'd like, but job's done. There was a boom as something heavy hit the door, and it leapt on its hinges. They're going to kill us, Lou whispered. Silvio crossed the room in half a dozen strides. Always have 3 plans, he murmured, and 3 ways out. He dragged aside one of the thick, feathery Pegasus skin rugs, and Lou saw a round port in the floor, looking much like the hatch of a ship. Lots of back doors in this warren, continued Silvio. That's what happens when you might have to run from the law at any moment. Come on. Lou jumped as another thud hit the far door and something cracked. She scampered across the room to follow Silvio onto a dark staircase. Don't bother putting the hatch back, he called over his shoulder. They'll know where it is and how we left. Just hurry. Then they were descending, round and round in a tight spiral. Any light from above was soon left behind. Lou could hear Silvio's patter just ahead of her and the heavier footfalls of their pursuers behind and above. She took comfort in the idea that the Grishnards must have either wasted precious time grabbing lanterns, or they were in the dark too. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached level ground. Silvio seemed to know where he was going and struck off to their left. Lou tripped on something and nearly fell. Sylvie? For one heart-stopping moment, she thought he'd left her, but then she felt his small hand close around hers. He all but dragged her along, around piles of something. Lou's nose caught up with her frightened brain. Odors of saffron and mint and sweet leaf, cheese and seasoned meat and leather. We're in the storeroom where I first came in. Something bumped behind them, and someone cursed. That'll be the guards. Someone had removed the lantern from the table by the low wooden door. Lou's sharp cat eyes were beginning to pick out dim silhouettes. Silvio's pale shape crouched by the door. Picking the lock. Let's hope it's not complicated. She caught sight of hulking Grishnard shapes coming around a pile of barrels, going carefully to avoid running into anything. The unfortunate creak as Silvio got the door open carried clearly across the room. There! Someone shouted, and they burst forward. Lou and Silvio darted through the door and began a new descent. The unpleasant odor of tallow candles hit Lou's nostrils, and she soon spied the flickering light of the disgusting things in wall sconces. So much for hiding in the dark. Down and down. Lou was winded by the time they reached the final hall, but she thought that their pursuers might have taken a wrong turn in the corridors behind them. For she and Silvio, on the other hand, the trail of burdock and cardamom led unerringly to the outside door, where the surprised-looking Leon slave boy stood staring at them. Silvio whipped out another knife, but Lou pushed his hand down. He's mute. Leave him alone. The boy didn't try to stop them as they raced through the door. They emerged into the pavilion amid the noise and stink of the bazaar. 2 guards were present this time. Wyvern piss. They looked at Lou and Silvio in surprise. Silvio waved the knife that he'd used to threaten the Leon boy, and both guards took a quick step back, drawing their swords. However, instead of throwing it at them, Silvio lashed at the side of the tent. He grinned, made a little bow, and darted through the gaping hole, Lou close on his heels. The rest was a blur when Lou thought about it later, racing through the bazaar with guards hard after them, scattering merchandise and knocking over tents, pounding into the maze of tunnels that led to the upper reaches of the underground. Each time Lou thought they'd lost their pursuers, she heard renewed cries from behind. The more respectable shops had closed by the time they reached the upper levels, which meant fewer places to hide, and fewer shoppers to confuse the pursuit. Silvio stopped just beneath the street. You, he snapped at a shopkeeper who was closing up. The Schelt, a female Leopon, eyed him warily and reached beneath her coat. Silvio trotted forward. No trouble, he said, waving his hands. But I want to buy your shop. She blinked at him. Well, that's... Silvio tugged on the chain around his neck and fished out the medallion that Lou had seen earlier. It was intricately wrought, inlaid with mother of pearl and set with gemstones. The shopkeeper tried to keep a neutral expression, but Lou saw her pupils dilate. I can't possibly make such a decision right now, she began. Oh, yes, you can, snapped Silvio. That's worth more than your shop and whatever you've got in it. And the first month's rent. You know it, now take it. The Leopon sputtered. Lou shifted from one foot to the other, glancing behind them. Any moment, she expected to see enraged Grishnards charging out of the shadows. The Leopon took the medallion and examined it. She sniffed it, took a thoughtful nibble. Well, Well, give me the key, snarled Silvio, and all but snatched it from her. There'll be another one like it tomorrow if you come back, give us a tour, and sign the papers, he continued, but only if you never saw us tonight. Now go. He grabbed Lou's hand, and they plunged into the blackness of the shop. Silvio threw the bolt on the door behind them, and Lou heard him fastening a chain and what sounded like several additional bolts. They stood still for a moment, panting. Then Lou heard the thud of footsteps in the hallway, angry shouting, and, after what seemed an eternity, silence. Lou leaned against the wall and shut her eyes. "Sylvia, I'm sorry," she whispered. "You just spent all the money you earned for risking your life because I made a stupid mistake." Silvio snorted in the darkness. She heard his voice moving around the room. "Some kind of rat poison? Did you really get it into his mouth that way? I thought you were just being silly." She gave a shaky laugh. "It's meant to be diluted with a lot more than half a decanter of wine. And no, I wasn't trying to get it into his mouth. It can be absorbed through the eyes. Faster than through the stomach, actually." "I see." He paused, his breathing becoming more even. "Good job taking out the big one first. How did you find me?" "Basil told me you wore the burdock root concoction." "Ah. Yes, that worked pretty well." There was an awkward pause. Lou felt her way across the room to the place where she'd last heard him. "Sylvie, I really am terribly sorry." She found his shoulder in the darkness. He was shivering. The after effects, Lou supposed, of their brush with death. "I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to kill me." Silvio laughed. He reached up and patted her hand. "Lou, there are a lot of Shelts in West Ravane who'd like to poison me, but I can't think of anyone else who would have come after me." Lou tried to hug him, and he let her. "For such a little thing, you do take up so much space." "I think Basil would come after you," she said after a moment. "Maybe. Come on. Your shop must have somewhere comfortable to sleep." "My shop?" echoed Lou, as she felt her way along behind him. "Well, of course," said Silvio over his shoulder. "What use have I got for a shop? Murder for hire. 40% off just this afternoon. And that reminds me, if you're going to kill your business partner, never do it on the cheap. That's the lesson in all of this." Lou giggled. "The only one?" After a moment, she said, "You're serious about the shop?" "Of course I'm serious. You just saved my life. Malpin says that one should reward loyalty." Lou shook her head. "I did that because I'm your friend, not your loyal employee." But she didn't say it, because she didn't think Silvio would understand. They found a cot in the back room. It was probably a one-person affair for a Grishnard or Leopon, but Silvio and Lou managed to cuddle up on it together. They lay on their sides. Lou put her face against the back of his neck, her arms around his chest, and shut her eyes. She felt the warmth of his body through their clothes. This was the part she'd missed. "So, Basil," she began, "is he a pirate?" Silvio yawned. "Sort of. Privateer in Cern's last war with Mordant. Occasionally an armed escort for a merchant ship. I won't say he's never done any smuggling, but I think he'd rather be fighting. Likes adventure." Lou smiled. "He likes you." Silvio gave a nervous laugh. "I guess. That too." "Is it true love? I saw you moved your sea chest in there." "I don't know. He's nice enough. Mostly." "Mostly?" "He's kind of an obnoxious drunk." "Obnoxious? Like hitting you?" "No, not like that. He drinks too much when he's under stress." "Are you stressing him?" Silvio snickered. "Don't I stress everyone?" He hesitated. "Did he behave himself when you dropped the potion off? He said you'd come early. He's not a morning person." "Oh, he was fine," said Lou quickly. "I think I sort of embarrassed him." "Embarrassed?" echoed Silvio. "I don't think Basil has been embarrassed a day in his life." "He seemed startled that I was a girl." "Oh." Silvio snickered. "Yeah, he can be funny about that. He was raised by Hunty. They picked him up in a burned-out village when he was 4. "Really?" Lou was even more intrigued. "So he's never been around other Grishnards much at all?" "Nope. And I think I'm his first boy."
Lou perked up considerably. You mean... Then she thought about it. Oh. Silvio laughed silently. Pretty strange, right? Hunty all look male to me, even with their clothes off. Although I guess they can tell some small differences. Does he think of me as a girl? I have no idea. I do think I'm the prettiest person he's ever had in his cabin. But that could be said of so many people, said Lou innocently, and Silvio gave her shoulder a pinch where he could reach it. He invited me to breakfast this morning, said Lou, but I couldn't stay. Would you mind if I came some other time? Silvio sounded sleepy. Course I don't mind. Come for dinner, stay all night, you know me. Lou felt a little sad. Basil likes you better than you like him. But she couldn't help feeling excited, too. I'd love to come. For dinner, I mean. Let's start with dinner. Author's note. This story was created as a contest prize for Lucy LeBlanc, who created a puppet show to celebrate the launch of the Guild of the Cowry Catchers Book 4. The Cowry Catchers series begins 13 years after the events described in Chemistry. Lou, Silvio, and Basil are all characters in that story. The series is available as ebooks, paper books, and podcasts. Music for this production included Call to Adventure, Sneaky Snitch, Plaint, Stormfront, Ghostpocalypse 4, The Temptress, Ghostpocalypse 6, Crossing the Threshold, Sneaky, The Descent, Comfortable Mystery, and Dama Ray, all from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com and used according to the terms of the website. Cover art was by Sarah Cloutier. I'm Abigail Hilton. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of Chemistry. And I'm back. This is 2026 Abby coming to you with a few thoughts on this story. So Chemistry was actually the second short story I wrote about these characters. I wrote it after Skydance, and that was back in 2013. The novel I was writing at the time was Hunter's Unlucky. I was writing it in and around some Panamindorah short stories. As with Quarantine, you can see the characters becoming who they will be in the Guild of the Cowry Catchers. So Basil is not as bitter at this point. He ultimately gives up a lot of his autonomy to follow Silvio into the Sea Watch, and Silvio gives him just enough attention to keep him coming back for more. But he doesn't like working for the temple. He doesn't like working for the priestess. And Silvio never quite loves him back the way he wants to be loved back, and their relationship is highly dysfunctional. And anyway, so by the time we meet him in the Guild of the Cowry Catchers, he has become an alcoholic as he attempts to deal with the direction his life has taken and is not in a great place. Of course, by this point in the story, by the end of book 2, Basil has recovered a bit from that situation. He has ended up with Lou, not Silvio. Lou is much better for him. He just doesn't handle Silvio as well as Gerard does, probably because Basil's dysfunction and Silvio's dysfunction just go together in a terrible way. Here in Chemistry, we've got the three of them interacting at fairly young ages. These are rough people living rough lives, obviously, arguably villains. An assassin, a pirate, and a chemist who makes poisons. But they have their hopes and dreams and moments of softness and moments of looking out for each other. So I hope you enjoyed this story. Hope you enjoyed some time in Lou's head. I think she's a fun character. She's a lot gentler than some of the people she hangs out with, but she can get pretty vicious when she thinks she needs to. Next week, we are going to have Taking Tricks, which is the last of the short stories in Book 2 of the Pirates of Weffervane series. And it features my favorite character of this whole series, whom you have not met yet at all. He is arguably the main character in The Scarlet Albatross, which is the next book that we're about to start into. and this short story will introduce him. I promise that the lives of the characters in this story will end up intertwining with the lives of the Cowry Catchers characters, but at this point in time, none of them have encountered each other. This is going to be a new cast of people you are meeting. Next week we'll be taking tricks, featuring Silas Appleby and Percy Bellwater, and I will see you there. This is Abigail Hilton, and you have been listening to the Pirates of Wefravain saga. Join me on Patreon for early episodes, long-form interviews, forum access, personal updates, and lots of artwork, including maps and species charts. That's patreon.com/Abigail Hilton. If you want the whole story now with no interruptions and some remastering of the early books for sound quality, you can find the entire series at shop.abigailhilton.com, along with all my other novels. The audiobooks are delivered by BookFunnel. Background music was Hidden Sky by Jamie Sieber, licensed from Magnatune.net circa 2014. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers podcast is an audio adaptation of the Pirates of Wefravain saga, written and produced by Abigail Hilton. Original production copyright 2010, all rights are reserved to the author.